After a brief hiatus, welcome back to the Chicago Thinker podcast. I'm your host, Jack Moore, and unfortunately my co-host, Arthur Long, cannot be here today. But we have both completed our thesis work from the previous winter quarter, so a new episode should be coming soon. But without further ado, let me introduce my guest for today, Ms. Kenzi Bustamante. Kenzi is the current leader of Students for Life at the University of Chicago, president of College Republicans, and the recruitment chair at the Chicago Thinker, among numerous other achievements. How are you today, Kenzi?
I'm good, Jack. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well.
Good.
So our topic at hand today is a subject that I know you care a lot about, Kenzi, and that is the topic of abortion, big on UChicago's campus. Most recently at the Thinker, our own writer, Ben Ogilvy, published an article titled UChicago Performs Illegal Late-Term Abortions and Advertises Them Online. He found that UChicago Medicine is willing to perform abortions up to 23 weeks in 6 days. I can only assume that is not only extremely late for the country, but also very much threatens the vitality of a fetus, because in that article, Ben talks about how over 50% of fetuses survive after 23 weeks. So in response, Kenzi, being the wonderful pro-life activist that she is, decided to take action and raise awareness for this issue by hosting an upcoming conference on life. So Kenzi, can you tell us what this conference is?
Yeah, so this conference, it was inspired partially because of what's been going on at UChicago Medicine, but also just the general environment on UChicago's campus. Whenever Roe v. Wade was overturned, the campus responded very negatively to it, as is predictable, but then they continue to do so throughout this year and last year. So this conference, it's hosted by Students for Life, which is a UChicago organization. It will be at Ida Noyes on April 20th, and it will last from about 9:30 to 3 p.m., and we'll have 4 different speakers. So
that sounds very nice. Sounds like a full event.
Yeah.
So what are the particular ideas you're going to discuss? Is it just Roe v. Wade, or is it like the foundations of the movement itself? Or
yeah, so we will be discussing the medical, legal, and philosophical foundations for the pro-life movement, and then forward-thinking policy to make the world a pro-life reality that we're all hoping for. We'll be discussing elements of politics and, really that foundation that's needed within the policy we're going to be seeing in the future in order to make the world amenable to these pro-life policies.
Yes. So who are the speakers that are going to be involved, and what would they talk about in particular?
Yeah, so our first speaker will be Ben Conroy, who is a PhD student at UChicago. He's a graduate from Oxford, where he was the Pro-Life Club's president, and he founded the Minimize Project, which is a conversation-based nonprofit. They work on kind of the grassroots approach of changing hearts and minds. That way, later laws and policy can also be changed. So he'll be laying out kind of the human organismal philosophical argument for the pro-life movement. So he'll be our first speaker. Then moving on to the medical elements, we have Dr. Kathy Altman, who is a Charlotte Lozier fellow, and she was a former abortionist who worked in the northern Florida area. She was a director of Planned Parenthood in that area for a while. She started, her career has its ups and downs. She had, she started working for the first rape treatment center in Florida, so she definitely has always had a heart for her patients. And she tells of a story of how she kind of came to her pro-life philosophy. And it's always, I saw it at the Cardinal O'Connor Conference on Life in Georgetown around the March for Life time, and she just has such an impactful story, so I'm really excited about her. So I'll talk a little quicker about my next 2 speakers.
As long as you want. We're doing this episode for the conference.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hear about it. I mean, abortion's such a big issue on our campus. I mean, are they not having the pro-abortion groups on campus? Are they not having a drive at all the different cafes to support abortion?
Yeah, I can talk about
stickers that say "I love abortion" on them.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm happy to talk about that in a second as well. So our third speaker is Dr. Monique Shiro-Webenhurst, and she is from the DeNicola Center for Ethics and Culture at Notre Dame. She has a global health emphasis that has definitely been in her career. She has an MPH, and she'll be talking about the negative impacts of abortion, specifically on the Black community, which is very relevant to our setting in the south side of Chicago. And then our fourth speaker, her name is Catherine Glenn Foster, and she's a lawyer who will be discussing the legal elements of the Pro-Life Foundation. She's also going to be sharing with the community about her initiative to make birth free. So she's been supporting that, one of those policies that's going to be essential to really making the world amenable to pro-life policies. She's also associated with Charlotte Lozier, I believe, and has done a lot of talks around the country, both internationally and domestically, and she was the former president of Americans United for Life. So
sounds like an absolutely star-studded cast. I mean, I know it's difficult to get all of these people on the campus and get the conference going. Do you have anyone that you'd like to thank for helping you out with this, anyone in particular?
Yeah, I wish I could thank the student government more, but they did not. They were not super helpful in funding. They did give us a little bit, but not nearly as much as we actually needed. We have various alumni donors and professors. Actually, on our website, which is UChicago Conference on Life.weebly.com, you can see who has sponsored us, and yeah,
well, that's wonderful.
They're amazing support. So
yeah. I know that the Students for Life group has worked very hard on this, and you have been working very hard on it as the leader on this. So, if you want to talk about this, I mean, I know we talked about Ben's article, and Ben's article was the one that came to light the most. And I mean, recently IVF has been in the news, and Ben has a piece in the works. I do not know if it's already published about what's going on at the business school. So, what do you think that this conference is going to mean for the UChicago environment? The people who are on campus who may disagree or may agree with you. What do you think this conference is going to do? Yeah,
well, I think this conference definitely gives a platform to discuss the pro-life movement in an academic setting, which has been extremely neglected by UChicago. You don't see it in the Human Rights Department ever be, if they talk about abortion or women's reproductive health and that kind of thing, it's always from a reproductive freedom stance. And really the humanity of the baby involved in these procedures is never considered. So yeah, you don't have the Human Rights Department ever talking about it. The philosophy departments aren't talking about it. UChicago Medicine has clearly defined their stance on it with their 23 weeks and 6 days abortion. And so, yeah, it's just finally giving a platform to the pro-life movement, and realizing, hopefully the audience will realize that there is a little bit of sanity behind our reasoning and a little bit of validity within our arguments that we're going to be presenting. So
yeah, certainly does give representation when all the different cafes at the University of Chicago are partnering with, was it Project Reproductive Freedom?
Yeah, so it's going to be super helpful. I think hopefully if the undergrads attend, which I'd encourage them all to, because I really, truly, genuinely don't believe that the majority of students on UChicago's campus understand what the pro-life movement is. They just hear that it's against abortion, and they think that it means we're against women, which is the exact opposite of the movement. So hopefully, yeah, it'll maybe ease some of the tensions on campus if people truly come genuinely ready to learn. And yeah, with the whole, as you mentioned, the coffee shop instances. So last year they had fundraising for the Chicago Abortion Fund, the pro-abortion group on campus, Project Reproductive Freedom. And yeah, the coffee shops were happy to collaborate with them. Whenever I emailed asking to do a pro-life fundraiser, they took 2 months to respond to me and then told me that they changed the policies. So definitely not as amenable to the pro-life stance, which I think just kind of highlights the underlying bias and institutional problems with how UChicago has approached the issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I saw was when you did that wonderful display on the quad with all the different flags representing the number of aborted children in Chicago, I believe. And the university just didn't defend it and just let it get destroyed. And when they said they would defend it, whoever was supposed to be there was obviously not supposed to be there. And I remember going and picking up one of the signs that said this is a display, don't mess with it, and having to put it back up again, and then the next day it was gone, and then everything else was destroyed again. Yeah, so in October we did that display. It represented the number of abortions that happen daily. That was all the sign said, is this is, these are flags that are put in the ground, and it represents this number. Nothing condemning, nothing extremely offensive, just facts. And we had students,
faculty, members of the community, trample it, pull out the flags, destroy it. Whenever I ask for, we have a security company on campus, and whenever I ask for them to, maybe watch it, keep it secure, they basically said we can't really do anything about it. Whenever I asked UChicago Police Department to maybe help a little bit, because it was vandalism, it was destruction of property, they were also apathetic. So yeah, just highlights again the university's hostile environment, or hostile temperament to this issue whenever it's presented from a pro-life viewpoint, which is contrary to what the university stands for. It wants people to be expressing, all different perspectives, and making the university the environment it's supposed to be, with free expression and open discourse about controversial topics. So.
Yeah, they certainly seem to take a lot of sides on a lot of different things, because there's definitely been a lot of protests recently, but none of them have been destroyed in the same sort of way. And of course there's been conflicts over the bigger one, the Israel-Palestine, like protest and counter-protest, of course, but... Yeah,
the general temperament of the university is pretty accepting of almost all viewpoints except for the pro-life viewpoint. Luckily, the administration, after all of that vandalism occurred, clearly defined that, freedom of speech meant not destroying other people's speech. So that was a nice supportive component from the university, but it would have been nicer if it had been in real time.
So. If it had actually been enforced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we're about to wrap up on time. Arthur and I usually do a national segment, so before we were on the podcast, we listened to a statement by Donald Trump about the states' rights argument for abortion, rather than Republicans going for a national abortion ban. So, as someone that is pro-life personally, and wants the country to outlaw abortion and be against it and be pro-life, what do you think of Donald Trump's standing?
Oh, getting very political. Well, as someone who is unapologetically pro-life, I wish that every single politician, every single representative would support the value of life, support it legally, protect it legally from conception to natural death. Unfortunately, that's just not a reality of the politics that we're within. I'm extremely appreciative of what Donald Trump was able to get accomplished with his Supreme Court justices and finally overturning Roe v. Wade. I wish that he was more pro-life. And I guess from an unbiased standpoint, or from a standpoint able to analyze the politics of this, he's doing it to meet the median voter and get as many votes as possible. I'd hope that he'd change his policy if he gets elected and continue to fight for the rights of the unborn. So. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a completely valid opinion. I think it's one that's very moderate, one could say, for someone who is very ardently pro-life.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't out here excoriating him for what he did. You were saying, I hope he changes his mind.
Yeah.
So, where's the conference going to be? When is it going to be? Just before we wrap up.
So it will be in Ida Noyes Hall on UChicago's campus on April 20th. Doors open at 9 p.m. and
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Sorry. Doors open at 9 a.m. And we look forward to seeing you and everybody else. So.
All right. So thank you all for watching. This has been the Chicago Thinker Podcast.